Haven't heard back from Bruce?
Okay, we're just going to give everybody another minute or two. I see a bunch of people coming into the room. We will start in the next minute or two. Thanks. Okay, I think we can get started. I want to thank everyone for joining our webinar to discuss CytoDyn today. In this webinar, we plan to go through in detail our plans on how we will advance the company and bring it to revenue and get the FDA approval that this company so desperately needs. You will hear from Bruce Patterson, our plan and why our group is the only group in the world who can achieve this. With that, let's get it kicked off. Paul Rosenbaum is going to give some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Jeffrey. This is our opportunity to tell you who we are and why we're doing this. We will cut through the misleading noise and give you only facts. We are well aware that there are people on this call who are dedicated to our defeat. Our call is aimed at all of you who have an open mind and want success for the company and your investment. I know you will listen closely to Dr. Patterson, especially his remarks about the patent issue, COVID long haulers, and BLA. Dr. Patterson will also give you a preview of the detailed plans that will be presented to all of you during the next few weeks. They include long haulers, cancer, and BLA. We are not interested in aligning ourselves with Big Pharma against shareholders. We have had no communications with Big Pharma. We want to develop leronlimab for the benefit of all our shareholders. None of the slate, except Dr. Patterson, is a shareholder of IncelDx. True, Jeff Beatty is a board member of IncelDx. However, he is not on our proxy slate. None of the slate has any financial interest in IncelDx. None whatsoever. None of us, including Dr. Patterson, wish for CytoDyn to buy IncelDx. It is simply not on our radar screen. At no time did any of us ever discuss a sale of IncelDx to CytoDyn. Please, let's put this issue to rest. It is truly a non-issue other than people who are trying to create dissent on the internet. We are shareholders just like you. We bought shares in the open market just like you. We have a large financial stake in the success of this company, just like you. Why are we doing this? Why is this group of shareholders dedicated to a change in management? The following statements are true facts. They are not meant to be negative. We are not a negative group. We are people fed up with this management, and we want change. We started early this year by asking the company to reconsider their relationship with Dr. Patterson. In our opinion, the stock hit its high because of Dr. Patterson, his recognized expertise, his worldwide reputation, and certainly his TED Talk. We wrote a long and positive letter trying to reunite the company with Dr. Patterson. Dr. Patterson had nothing to do with our endeavor to do so. We were just a bunch of concerned shareholders, including many that were not involved with the 13D. We never received a response from the company other than, we can't talk about it. We then sent 8 separate letters to the board of directors pointing out the inconsistencies between Nada Poorhausen's public statements to shareholders and actual filings that the company made with the SEC. We never received a response from the company other than, we can't talk about it. We then filed a Schedule 13D that acknowledged the general agreement among those shareholders that change was needed at the company and to put the company on notice that there was a degree of consensus as to grievances. The hope, our hope, was that the filing of the 13D would, as it does in most other situations, commence a dialogue with the company. To no avail. Never a response from the company other than, we can't talk about it. While the terms 13D and proxy were mentioned throughout our conversations and emails, we attempted to the very last ounce of our strength to avoid a proxy fight. We prepared for the possibility, but was hoping all the while it wasn't going to happen. It's truly the last resort for any shareholders to pursue a proxy fight. Why on God's earth do you think we would spend the time and money to fight management if we didn't believe in the drug and its value? Please, no matter what you think of us, understand we're doing this because we think the drug is fantastic and the company is worth saving. For over 2 years now, all of us, I'm looking at this screen, I'm saying every single person on this screen, no exception, woke up every morning saying this will be the day we get approval. This will be the day that the CD10 will be approved. This will be the day that the CD12 will be approved. This will be the day that the BLA will be approved. Cancer, GVHD, NASH, the Philippines, Mexico. This will be the day that we see the value in this stock. That day never came. That's why I'm on this call and the slate is on this call talking to you. The day never came. In your gut, no matter how much you want to defend this company, you know something was wrong with the BLA submission. A world-class mismanagement at best, complete incompetency at worst. There are no excuses for the BLA fiasco. That mistake alone should call for a change of control. Let me say this, clear and loud. Dr. Patterson had nothing to do with the BLA failure, and he will address that coming up very soon. My last comments. Yes, I run a chemical company. But for those of you who didn't know it, before that, I was the CEO of a public NASDAQ company dealing in distribution and information management. That company employed over 1,000 people in our national and international divisions. I was the CEO. I dealt with Wall Street for over 9 years on every single level. I had an independent board that I reported to. I want to tell you the key word is independent. I was paid $425,000 while producing significant revenue and being profitable. Management should only get rewards and stock options if they're producing profits for the shareholder. Let me repeat that loud and clear. Management should only get rewards and stock options if they're producing profits for the shareholder. Only a company with no independent board can create those results. Accountability. There is none at Cynodyne. And there won't be unless you change management. That's why we're meeting with you today, to go through the noise and tell you our side of the story. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce a man, in my opinion, impeccable character and a brilliant scientist, Dr. Bruce Patterson.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, shareholders, for allowing us to speak to you today. You know, there's been a lot of words said over the last year and a half, and there's great opportunities out there for this drug, as I've spoken about in a number of times, and regardless of what my relationship has been with Cynodyne. But what I want to do today is absolutely clear up all the misinformation, all the mysteries that are out there that have put us in a bad light. I've been called every name under the book. My family has been disparaged. My company has been disparaged. And I want to set the record straight. And I'm going to set the record straight by showing actual data, actual information, actual notes, something that you haven't gotten but words from Cynodyne. To start with, let's start in the beginning of January 2020. I went to China. I got back from China on January 10th. I went to China to meet with a company called Longjin, one of our partners, to talk about our immune profiling assays, both for cancer and infectious diseases. And at that time, I was made aware of the coronavirus and what it was doing to the immune response. In fact, they called it an immunologic virus, which is the first time I've ever heard anyone use that term. I was supposed to go to Wuhan to meet with KindStar, an IncellDx customer, and of course was rebuffed by KindStar because of this massive outbreak of coronavirus at the time. So when I came back from China, the first thing IncellDx started working on was the coronavirus. If you look at our company, it's been all about cancer, virology, and immunology since its inception in 2010. That brings up another point. When anybody works for a biotech company or a tech company, there's two things you sign: your employment agreement and a patent assignment agreement. What it basically says is when you're working under this roof, everything you develop is owned by the company. That is standard issue. It's standard in academia. When I was at Northwestern, I had to sign over all my patents to Northwestern. When I was at Stanford, I had to sign over all my patents to Stanford. When I'm at IncellDx, working for IncellDx, I have to sign all my patents over to IncellDx. No questions asked. I was never an employee of Cynodyne. And as I'll show you, a consulting agreement is a consulting agreement to give advice. By no stretch of the imagination does it give you license to anything that the company that you're working for has developed. That's called a license agreement, okay? But I'd like to first start by sharing some documents because this is something that you haven't seen and haven't been aware of. So beginning in January 2020, I wrote to Cytidine from Shanghai concerning Longjin and putting the two together. This message: hi guys, Cytidine has agreed to provide drug for use in coronavirus infection. Leronlimab would significantly enhance the cell-mediated immune response against virally infected cells and also target alveolar macrophages to prevent or minimize the cytokine storm. Best, Bruce. Notice the date, January 27th, 2020. IncellDX knew what coronavirus did far before we even contacted Cytidine towards the end of January. I went on to say, Longjin should think about exclusively launching HIV protease inhibitor plus leronlimab combination for coronavirus. This could be a game changer for everyone. So we went on. I wrote this email to Cytidine, working on it. And it refers to this email below from Nader. Any news is up. Being able to use leronlimab in China will take our stock to a whole new level. Notice, that was to me and to IncellDX. We had the relationship with Longjin, and that was later released in a press release in February that has been long since forgotten. I said, working on it, so far so good. Great day in the OTC. I think the only response to emerging threats is the immune system, innate and adaptive. And I've been saying this for 2 years now, and we'll be saying that in Rome this week when I talk about how to battle this pandemic. There is no time to develop vaccines or antivirals, microbials in such a short time frame. I am speaking at a cancer diagnostics meeting tomorrow in Minneapolis, and that is going to be my theme, IncellDX's theme. We need to look at the immune system like we are in cancer. That was the first time I said that, and I've been saying it for the last 2 years on all opportunities I've had in different podcasts, meetings, etc. That we need to think of coronavirus and COVID as cancer. In many cases, such as this coronavirus, all the damage is immune mediated. That's a message to Nader and Scott Kelly in January 2020. That wasn't coming from them to me. That was coming from me to them. I go on to say, in discussing with Kush, trying to get the drug, also, the general description plan for cancer would lay out the mechanism for coronavirus nicely. This is me talking about the mechanism for coronavirus. What are we targeting? What we are targeting is the immune-mediated damage, see paper, in coronavirus infections via macrophages. I still have said almost 2 weeks ago in a talk that this is a macrophage-mediated disease. I go on to say, this is a paper I wrote a while back. We need to prepare for higher doses in coronavirus. And of course, it's the paper I wrote in the 1990s on the regulation of CCR5 and CXCR4 expression by type 1 and type 2 cytokines. CCR5 expression is downregulated by IL-10 and CD4 positive lymphocytes. Again, I've known for 30 years what cytokines do to CCR5 expression. That's the background that we bring as part of the 13D in getting these applications for COVID and ultimately for long haulers over the finish line. And last, in terms of the consulting agreement, people talk about how broad it was. Here's the scope: clinical trial strategy, including companion diagnostics needs. How does that translate into anything you develop regarding new applications for CCR5 antagonists, a field that I've been working in for 30 years? Not to mention my rights as an employee of IncellDX to assign all of my patents and my ideas to IncellDX, like anyone in academia would, like anyone in any other tech field would. So I'll stop sharing this for a moment. Another thing that came up along the way was that what was the dosing? Okay. Here's a letter from Nader. Dear Jay, I spoke to Kush about this, and he is going to explain in the call why we have to wait on all these. The protocol is only for 30 patients, and the way he and Bruce are envisioning this trial is injecting the patients only for 28 days, 4 injections. Yes, I was the one who first proposed with Kush the use of 4 injections in leronlimab that was ignored by somebody. And I wouldn't know because I wasn't part of the FDA meetings at that time. And then we go on. People talk about, oh, it was Dr. Seetham at Montefiore who came up with this. Here's a message to Dr. Seetham, March 11th, 2020, 3 months after my return from China and the beginning of my work with IncellDX on the coronavirus. I'm copying Dr. Bruce Patterson, formerly Stanford University professor. I'm also copying Jay Lalezari, who's initiating our coronavirus trial very soon. Jay and Bruce, please see below. Dr. Seetham does lung transplant at his hospital in Bronx, has 9 patients in ICU with coronavirus, needs leronlimab. This isn't Dr. Seetham telling us what to do. This isn't Dr. Seetham coming up with the use of leronlimab in COVID. This was us suggesting it to Dr. Seetham, who boldly enough went through with the trial, but it took a lot of convincing, I can admit to that. Next, the paper. Everyone talks about the paper. We submitted the paper and got this message in July. Dear Dr. Patterson, a concern has been raised regarding your submission, as it has been suggested that some of the data included within the paper may be owned by Cytodyne, who has not given permission for this data to be used. Yes, it was Cytodyne who blocked the paper for quite some time and set us back at a time when people actually were considering leronlimab for COVID, when people were actually interested in hearing about its mechanism of action, stunted by the person representing the shareholders. Now, you know, the fact is, we talk a lot about the patent situation. Well, here's a definition of inventorship versus authorship. And what it says is, when does an author qualify as an inventor? An inventor is somebody who contributes to the conception of the invention. I already showed you where the conception of the inventions related to COVID came from. And somebody who merely reduces the invention to practice or only makes a financial contribution is by law not an inventor. Okay, by definition, you can't, just because you paid for something or not partially, you're not an inventor. I think that's a very important concept that non-legal experts can understand. The other thing is this proposal that supposedly IncellDX brought to Cytodyne. Nothing could be further from the truth. It was actually at the end of January, which I haven't included here, where I was invited to Vancouver, Washington, to talk to Cytodyne about bringing IncellDX into the fold. And this was the cover letter to the proposal. Dear Scott Nader, very much appreciate our great working relationship so far and our respective technologies as being very synergistic. In yellow, as we thought through the proposal you asked us to provide, we wanted to make sure you understood all the contributions we've made to Cytodyne as we go forward to unlock this tremendous value. And what was that value? Upfront of $150 million in cash and stock. Development milestones based on Cytodyne milestones, approval of COVID-19, further commercial success, this is the only way we would have realized any additional capital on this deal should it have occurred. And to this day, none of them have been achieved. I don't know where $350 million came from, but they certainly didn't come from this cover letter. So last, I want to get into the nuts and bolts. And the first thing I want to discuss is the BLA. Since it's been made public, I have no qualms about sharing the information in the BLA. And the fact is, this is IncellDx's data from the BLA on receptor occupancy in the monotherapy trial, which was later used for dose justification. And as you can see, every single patient had 3 determinations: receptor occupancy, viral load, and CD4 count. In these second lines below the colored lines are receptor occupancy results. Where are they? They're not there. Only a few of them started to have some after 24 weeks. The bottom line is IncellDx was not involved in the combination therapy at all. And IncellDx only came in on the monotherapy in the last third of the trial. And as you can see from this data, this hardly looks complete. And that was the exact comment from the FDA, that it was incomplete. My point now is, going forward with the BLA, there's still a lot of unanswered questions because they've refused to share the refuse to file document from the FDA. But I can assure you the reasons are not because of the receptor occupancy assay that we performed. Number one, there was an issue with tropism. Tropism was actually required in the BLA study if you look at the submission to the FDA. Tropism is on the viral side. Before you're enrolled in this trial, you must have a viral isolate that actually uses CCR5, or why else use leronlimab, okay? If you have an X4 isolate like drug addicts have or latent disease, you don't qualify because the drug will have no activity. I think there's also a misnomer that leronlimab is actually antiviral. It's not. It has no activity against HIV replication. And all it does is it blocks new cells from being infected. And that's extremely important. But the proper metric for that would have been to look at the change in CD4 count over time. The drug failed, the CD4 count would go down. The drug was successful, CD4 count would be maintained. Okay? By using viral load in this trial, it's analogous to using glucose for a cholesterol drug. Okay? This needed to be discussed with the FDA. The other thing that needed to be discussed with the FDA is that the 350 milligram dose may be perfectly adequate. Because we published a paper in 1990 that showed that the amount of CCR5 on T cells goes down with antiretroviral therapy. Therefore, the requirement for drug would be far less in those on combination therapy, which is the BLA. Monotherapy, it's a different story. That's why using monotherapy for dose justification makes no sense. They're not on antiretroviral therapy. They have really, really high levels of CCR5 in their cells, thus requiring more drug, as you can see by some of the monotherapy data that's been released. The problem is, in monotherapy, there's nothing keeping latently infected cells from making virus and causing a spike in viral load just on leronlimab. And that can occur during infection, inflammation. Many factors can go into play to increase the replication of latently infected cells in HIV. Yet there's nothing to decrease the viral load. because leronlimab doesn't decrease the viral load. It protects uninfected cells. Okay, so the design of all of this has been confounding. The other confounding factor is there was a conference call in November of 2020 where it's very clear that CytoDyn confused tropism with receptor occupancy. Tropism is all about the virus. Receptor occupancy is all about the cell. Okay, the thought that receptor occupancy could replace tropism, which they wanted to do because tropism was $3,000 an assay, is complete confusion. That could be straightened out in a single meeting with the FDA amongst colleagues. I can go in with several colleagues of mine in HIV and have a discussion with the FDA that 350 milligrams, which there's already a significant p-value, is adequate, because more is not better. And we have to know what the expression of CCR5 is in all applications of leronlimab, whether it be coronavirus, cancer, or in HIV. That has to be known at all times. Why? Because CCR5 is a moving target. It goes up and goes down almost on a daily basis. And to not know what the levels of CCR5 are in terms of dosing is very short-sighted. However, the receptor occupancy that we developed using actual Pro-140 as a reagent is an amazing diagnostic. And in fact, in CD10, we knew everybody who was on placebo or who was on therapy. And at the end of the day, when the code was broken, we were able to call 83 out of 86 different patients appropriately, whether they're on treatment or placebo, using our receptor occupancy assay. The 3 we weren't able to call was because the samples arrived 6 days after they were sent. So again, the necessity of having powerful companion diagnostics with a very potent drug is a match made in heaven. Okay. The other big area that I want to talk about is our plans for the long hauler trial. We now surpassed 10,000 long haulers in our program, not 26, 10,000, 8 of which were in the leronlimab trial and told us that they were on either ivermectin or fluvoxamine while they were taking the leronlimab. So how can we even think about how effective leronlimab was? However, we now have 10,000 patients worth of data showing the role of CCR5 antagonists in long haulers. We published it in Frontiers in Immunology 2 months ago, showing that CCR5 is significantly upregulated. But more importantly than that, we showed in that paper that long haulers is all about vascular inflammation. And our subsequent paper showed that vascular inflammation is caused by the presence of the S1 protein of COVID in non-classical monocytes 17 months after infection. You know what those non-classical monocytes express? CCR5. You know what else they express? The fractalkine receptor. So by using the combination of a CCR5 antagonist, happens to be Maraviroc because I can get it, and a fractalkine pathway inhibitor, statins, has been extremely effective in long haulers. And in fact, we've been approached by federal regulators. We've been approached by people who want to fund trials of CCR5 antagonists in long haulers. This wasn't coming from us. Yes, I spoke to FDA consultants and regulators about CCR5 antagonists as a class and how to design a trial and what the FDA is looking for in a trial in terms of outcomes. And yes, that allowed us to design a phase 3 trial that with our 1,000 patients a week could be enrolled in less than a month. Okay, which means a 3 to 4 month turnaround time to a potential EUA. That's what we could do as a 13D group. And with access, this number of patients, this access because of our visibility with the government, with numerous articles, numerous publications on long haulers, the talk in Rome that was invited about long haulers. We are the experts in long haulers worldwide and are being recognized for it. It's about time that leronlimab saw its place in the realm of long hauler treatment, which we could easily do with our patient population. And last, cancer. And all of these will go into in much more detail. But in terms of cancer, you know, there's other drugs on the market that I find very similar to leronlimab. Leronlimab is not a standalone in cancer. Leronlimab could possibly be used as adjuvant therapy like tamoxifen is in breast cancer as a solo agent. That's far down the line. Where I see leronlimab's biggest use is with the PD-L1 inhibitors. In our detailed plan, which we'll show you, there are 6 companies that have PD-L1 or PD-1 antagonists, only 2 of which have CCR5 assets. The other 4 don't. Those companies that have PD-L1 inhibitors are looking for combination therapy. We also have a slide that shows that everything in cancer involving immunotherapy right now is combination therapy. There's not a single agent that's used alone. Opdivo is not used alone anymore. Keytruda is not used alone anymore. Those are $10 billion a year drugs, okay? They're being used with Yervoy, which is a CTLA-4 inhibitor. They're being used with a LAG-3 inhibitor. Yervoy, being Robin to Opdivo's Batman, is making $1.5 billion a year. So just because leronlimab has to be the companion to a PD-L1 inhibitor does not mean that there is substantial revenue in cancer, and it does not mean there'll be substantial market cap increases when we get that combination approved. The best part of it is doing making deals and partnerships with big pharma to combine leronlimab with their PD-L1 inhibitors. That's extremely powerful. That's what they're looking for. You may not know this, but the patent for Opdivo is over 1 year from now. So they're looking for combinations to file new patents on the combination. And once Opdivo is a generic, God knows how many companies will be out there looking for an edge and a differentiator. Leronlimab is that differentiator. You know why? Yervoy only corrects T-cell exhaustion and potentially blocks the influx of T regulatory cells. We already know leronlimab does that. Leronlimab blocks T regulatory cells. In fact, we wrote a paper on it in 2017 at IncelDX and have a patent on the use of CCR5 antagonists from 2017 in inhibiting T regulatory cells. That's extremely important in cancer. And the other thing is leronlimab, as we found in the coronavirus trials, corrects T-cell exhaustion. It also has a function that nobody has heard about because nobody has written about it besides us, and that is leronlimab brought back granzyme A and CD8 T cells. Those are the bullets that CD8 T cells use to kill cancer cells and to kill virally infected cells. That's an activity that was never known before until we wrote the paper that, of course, got out 6 months too late because it was blocked by Cytodyn. How is that for irony? Long and short of it is we have a significant cancer plan. We have a significant long hauler plan that would take advantage of a 10,000 patient cohort that everybody wants a piece of right now. And the BLA can be corrected very quickly, I believe, with a conversation with the FDA, expert to expert, and explaining what we're looking for and why there shouldn't even be dose justification. More is not better. I mean, this is like a high school science class where if something wasn't working, you added more. Well, you know what? That's not how science works. Even our beloved PCR, if you overload it with DNA, you inhibit it. So science isn't more is better. For some applications, as we spelled out in coronavirus, where there was significant inflammation, yeah, we need more. More is better. But it may not be in HIV when they're on antiretroviral therapy, where we've already shown that CCR5 is downregulated. This is what we bring to the table. It's a broad knowledge of all three of the major applications for leronlimab, and then some. We're not even going to talk about our thoughts on possible topical delivery for anti-inflammatories, cosmetic applications. These are all something that we've discussed that may be low-hanging fruit and have much lower bar in terms of FDA submissions. But again, that's for another day, because I think we need to focus on the applications that are right in front of us, but do it correctly and do it with the knowledge of how the drug works, and do it with knowledge of what needs to be looked for, and do it with the knowledge of what the outcomes should be. That's what we bring to the table, in addition to the FDA and regulatory experience of Dr. D'Errico and Dr. Statz and Melissa Yeager. They're incredible. And you know what? They've been there before. They've sat in front of the FDA, as have I, and talked to them. And we come up with the same conclusions. The FDA at times just wants to be educated. They want you to discuss with them in obviously kind ways how best to look at a particular drug. And they can be very receptive. It's not an antagonistic relationship, nor should it ever be. And that's what we bring to the table as well. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to others. But I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the opportunity to clear the air, to clear the record of this narrative that's been created and taken hold over time, which is just beyond untrue. And I look forward to this drug, absolutely. I wasn't lying when I'd say it on social media that, yeah, I wish leronlimab was available, that I'd use it. Absolutely would, because there's activities, as I suggested, that nobody knows about, and that I'm looking forward to publishing. We've published 8 papers on COVID this year at IncelDX. And we're still waiting for a paper on where's CD10, where's CD12. There's so much data there, so much information. Where's the publications? I'd personally love to see them. But I'll turn it over, and appreciate the time to get on these calls. I am an open book. I'm willing to share anything and everything that that leads us to the promised land. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bruce. Paul, should we start the Q&A? You're on mute, Paul.
Yeah, Bruce, can you take the screen down?
Oh, sure.
So as requested, we had a number of questions that were emailed, and there were a lot of questions about financing the company. So one of them is, how do you plan on financing future clinical development and trials? I think we touched on it, but Paul, do you want to maybe speak to that a little bit?
Well, there's two things that's important. Bruce mentioned the fact that he can have a quick enrollment and that he has funding for it, which is incredibly important. The company—
Non-dilutive financing. Yeah.
Yes, and absolutely. Finally. Yeah. So listen, if we have the funding for it, which we do, then we need to go into institutions and get some backup financing for that, based on the fact that the funding will be available for a phase 3 trial, which is incredibly important. And we have to get in, when we take over this company, we have to get in and actually look at the books and understand exactly where they are. But the fact that we can have interim funding on a trial that will, potentially produce great amount of revenue is incredibly important for us at this point.
Okay. Should your group attain control of the board, will any current CytoDyn employees be retained?
Let me answer that one. I took over a company that was a NASDAQ company and under very difficult circumstances. We've talked about this. A company is only as good as its people. When I came on board, I let the CEO go and the board went. Everybody else in the company stayed, including the president of the company. It takes time and effort to take a look and understand exactly your personnel. As far as we're concerned, every single employee of that company should remain. We have to look at what the value is, and if anybody is bringing any value at all, of course they're going to remain. We're not going to make any changes at all as far as the employees are concerned until we have a chance to go in and evaluate it. And for certain people in the company who are considered to be indispensable, well, my goodness gracious, we want them there. The company is only good as its people.
Will the 2 COVID trials in Brazil continue as planned? Tom, do you want to maybe?
I'd be more than happy to. Listen, to the extent that the trials in Brazil get started, if we're going to assess, and if we're getting information and it looks like the trials are proceeding, why in the world would we not want to gather that information? So more or less echoing what Paul said in terms of personnel, any studies that are proceeding, enrolling well, not having difficulties, adequate funding, we're going to continue them. Be silly not to.
Are big pharma partnerships considered inevitable? And if yes, when and how will they be pursued?
As I said before, we're not looking at it. We haven't had any interest in aligning ourselves with big pharma. We have nobody on this proposed slate that has any communication with big pharma. But Dr. Patterson said it very succinctly and very clearly. We have some incredible revenue opportunities in the future with big pharma. And we have a man here who understands this so well. And anybody on this call understands that he understands that so well. We're not going to turn down any opportunity in which the shareholder is going to get a huge amount of revenue on the basis of what we have.
And in fact, we'd come in with leverage because these companies are going to need this drug to differentiate once all the patents have run out on the PD-L1 inhibitors. It's going to be the wild, wild west. And basically, whoever has the best companion to that drug is going to win out. So this is a way that we keep our leverage in those negotiations with big pharma by saying, this is what leronlimab can do. It can do everything that Yervoy can do. It can do everything that the LAG-3 inhibitors can do. It's safer, and you need this. And that's how we would go in and discuss that. And we're gonna have far more players than just BMS and Merck in the PD-L1 field. In fact, Roche is one of them who doesn't have a CCR5 asset.
Bruce, this is Tom. You can't necessarily toot your own horn, but I'm just going to tell you that pharmaceutical companies are not looking just to buy an asset as a drug. They're looking for a physician champion, someone who has international clout, someone that when they speak to the FDA recognizes that their years of publications and treat them with respect. You bring that to the table, Bruce. And this company sorely lacks that now. And they don't seem to be able to interact well with physician champions.
And let me
maybe.
Let
Well, I
me
was
say
just
one
gonna
other thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is important. Dr. Thomas Errico, he has over 150 patents, medical patents approved. He is a consultant to the FDA. Dr. Peter Staats is one of the top pain doctors in the country. He works with the FDA on long haulers. I mean, it goes right to the point. We have people, Melissa Yeager, please don't ever say again that she's connected to Big Pharma because she was commercial development officer for Gilead 12 years ago. It's so silly. She has spent 30 years getting drugs approved by the FDA. We have 4 people on this board that are impeccable with the FDA. You have a 20-person company. Everyone is trying to tell you you need all the firepower in the world with the FDA in order to get these drugs approved. And look at what we're bringing to the table. They are fantastic.
I was just going to ask Dr. Patterson to speak a little bit about his upcoming trip to Italy, who the audience is, who the presenters are, and how it may impact the way the world views various parts of COVID.
Yeah, this has been it's an honor and a great opportunity. 50 world experts in COVID were invited to this meeting in Italy, the International COVID Summit. And for 2 reasons. Number one, I think as a group, we know that obviously the vaccines are out there, but there's been a shortage of therapeutics and therapeutic approaches, or even discussions of therapies. And so these 50 individuals we're all talking about therapeutic approaches to this pandemic. And it's been exquisitely organized and divided into what do you do for prophylaxis? What do you do in early infection? What do you do in moderate infection, severe, critical? Now, I'm obviously there for the long hauler piece. So we're basically laying out the treatment landscape, what's worked, what hasn't worked in front of the world and in front of global media. The most important thing is on day 2 of the meeting, we all present in front of the Italian Senate because their government is so interested in embellishing what the vaccines can do.
Dr. Staats, will you please talk a little bit about your experience dealing with the FDA?
Well, certainly. I've been working with the FDA in some capacity for 25 years plus. I started my career at Johns Hopkins, where I was chief of the division of pain medicine, which I co-founded. While I was there, I invented a drug that is now licensed to a pharmaceutical company and is a commercial product out there. Over the years, I've been a principal investigator in a number of clinical trials, including a drug now called Prialt, which is a novel type of drug used for intraspinal drug delivery for severe pain-related disorders. And again, over the years, I have worked collaboratively with the FDA, evaluating projects and new therapeutics that have come through the FDA as a consultant to the FDA. So I have a very positive relationship with the FDA. And I do believe that the FDA is primarily concerned about safety and efficacy. And as we can demonstrate this, they're not bad people. They really want what's best for the American citizens as well. I think we can get there.
Same question for Dr. Errico. Dr. Errico, will you please go through your experience with the FDA and list some examples of interactions with them?
Well, I first walked into the FDA in the mid 1980s as a consultant for a company, and it was an eye-opening experience. I have been in and out of the FDA over the next 35 years, countless times, sometimes dealing with the FDA for a small startup company like Cytodyn, and sometimes dealing with incredibly large corporations like Pfizer. I, like Peter, have been a principal investigator on both drug and medical device studies. And I want to sort of put to rest this concept that the FDA is out to get us. Listen, I have been a representative for Pfizer at the FDA, and does the FDA treat them differently than they treat a small company? Well, yes. When you show up with 50 consultants to an FDA meeting, they treat you a little differently than when you go there with 3 or 4 people. But I do think that they treat small groups well. They're looking for someone to interact with. They have their medical experts there, and they want to see on the other side medical experts that they respect so that they can have a dialogue to develop a mutual plan. They don't want to tell you exactly what they want. They want to hear your plan and give some feedback to you. So there's no doubt that we can be successful with the FDA, but you have to dot your I's, you have to cross your T's. You can't have missing data points on anything you submit to them. They will just turn around. I mean, the worst thing you could do with the FDA is waste their time.
Great, thank you. Will executive compensation be aligned with the achievement of tangible results? Paul, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, of course it will be. The most important consideration, I sit on a compensation, I've sat on compensation committees of public companies. I sit on one now, and you have to look at comparable companies. We have 20 people in this company, 20 people. You have to look at what comparable companies do. And if you're out of line, you have to put it back in line again. You have a CEO of this company, Cytodyn, last year that an executive compensation was paid, total executive compensation was paid $10 million. The only 2 people in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington region that was paid more was the chairman of the board and president of Nike. You have to look at comparable companies. That's the first thing any compensation committee does. And you have to you have to be competitive, but you also have to be cognizant of what the other companies are doing.
Okay, so I would like to address an issue that came up through an email that was forwarded to us by a large shareholder. The shareholder sent me a private message and basically asked me to address why our nominating committee and or group of our slate is aligning with Buyers Strike, which is a well-known short seller that has the goal of lowering the price or manipulating the price down of Cytodyn. Let me be very clear about this. I think that the Buyers Strike and anyone affiliated with that group are bad people. I think that they are costing the world lives, and we have no affiliation with them. We are not aligned in any way with what they're trying to achieve. They are putting out hit pieces full of lies and trying to deceive and manipulate people into selling their shares. We are not aligned with that in any way. Next question. What are your thoughts on a reverse split? Would that be considered?
I'm going to answer that. This company management put a proposal on the ballot three and a half years ago for a 15-to-1 reverse split. I personally called up and let my displeasure be known to anybody that would listen to me. There's no need for a reverse split. The only way on any circumstances, if you want to uplift to another company, another exchange, there's no reason for it. We're a pink slip company. There's absolutely no way in the world, and I talk for everybody on here, that we're interested in a reverse split. We've said it 100 times over, and yet there'll be people tomorrow posting on it that this company, this group is interested in a reverse split. Plain and simple, we are not. We are opposed to it, period.
We got a lot of questions about some of the financing deals that that the company has entered into. This was, I thought, the best worded one. How do you plan to remove Fife from the hands, neck, and feet of CytoDyn? And I know, Art, you've spent a lot of time working on this. I don't know if you would like to elaborate a little bit about what what we found in some of these toxic financings.
Thanks. Yeah, we actually found a lot. If you dig through all of the SEC filings, trying to discern what's being said in the 10Ks and 10Qs, it is not necessarily always very articulate, but you can piece things together. And so some notes that I'll refer to. It's going, first of all, it's going to be very difficult because we borrowed money, plain and simple, and we have to pay it back. What we have found in almost all of the convertible notes, that ultimately the notes get settled through negotiations, side deals, other things that are transpiring that there's no disclosure on. You just read about them in the 10Ks and 10Qs, but they don't align with the transaction terms that are listed in the convertible notes themselves. They also represent a significant dilution of shares. And so in the rare circumstance that we actually paid Fife cash, that was non-dilutive. All the other ones were dilutive. And so the first question I have is, why do you pay cash back to the guy who loaned you the cash? It doesn't seem to make sense. And so in terms of just the history of the transactions, we've borrowed $142.5 million and received about $125 million in cash since the middle of 2018. Over that time, the note that was issued in 2018, $5.7 million in principal, that was settled for 13.2 million shares. If you look at the January 29th note, that was $5.7 million in principal. That was settled for 14.8 million shares. What's interesting, though, and I think people picked up on this, that January note for 5.7 million shares, it was noted in the 10Q that it was settled according to the terms of the note. And then the 10K included a footnote that was pretty well hidden that talked about the transfer of additional 4 million shares for $22.5 million value on June 29th of 2020, a day before the stock went up to $10.01 and dropped to $4.65 within 7 minutes. The actual repayment on that loan was 14.8 million shares, a total of $27.9 million of value on a $5.7 million loan. That's a return on the loan itself of over 400% for less than 2 years worth of work. If you look at the value, assuming those shares were sold back into the market, and we pretty much know that those shares get sold back in the market, that loan alone netted Fife over 1,000% return when you take into account the value of the shares that got sold back into the market. even though you hear a lot about non-dilutive, potentially non-dilutive shares, which is the catchphrase, the transaction terms that are listed in the notes themselves have a lot of trigger amounts. So if you look at the history of how these eventually get settled, it says $10 conversion rate. They ultimately get settled for 85% of the lowest closing rate in the 20 days prior to the redemption. And that's how they actually get paid. If you look at the history of the repayments, there's never one that's done at $10 a conversion rate per share. There's significantly less. And so those are issues that have occurred. Where we're concerned is the most recent August S3 filing. On its surface, it would appear that they're issuing a limited number of shares. I have to look at my notes, please. Give me a second here. So the S3 lists that it's pending. They are listing it for 5.7 million shares, but they list a total value at $57 million. When that same type of conversion rate was shown in prior S3 filings, if you look at the July note, and prior to that, there was a September note, and one related to the November note. They ultimately settled for the dollar amount and backed into the amount of shares based upon the prevailing market rate. If that same approach is followed with the current S3 filing, they will convert $57 million worth of value, which happens to be the principal and interest outstanding on the 2 April notes, for over 50 million shares converted. That will exhaust, if that happens, that will exhaust almost all the available shares that are allowed to be issued with the limit of 800 million. And so there are concerns on our part. They've significantly diluted shareholder value, and very concerned about the latest S3 filing and what could eventually be transferred in repayment. And it's possible that they could repay off all the loans if that S3 gets authorized.
Thank you, Art.
But one other point, and leave no shares available for future use.
Right. What are your plans to make CytoDyn attractive to institutional investors? I can handle that one. I worked in investment banking for 25 years, Goldman Sachs first, and then Merrill Lynch. I've dealt with a lot of professional investors, and I will tell you that they are loath to buy shares of any company that is listed OTC or pink sheets. So it's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, they put their jobs at risk if the investment doesn't work out, and it's a pink sheet stock. So getting uplisted is important, and I don't think that's going to happen until the company is able to generate revenue. And I think we showed you a number of ways that we expect to help the company in that area. There were a number of questions about whether we had authority to discuss leronlimab with the FDA. And I think as Bruce made clear, we mentioned general CCR5 antagonists and not leronlimab specifically. Many questions about have these discussions in any way undermined the discussions and work of the current CytoDyn management team. Again, the answer is no. Paul, there has been some questions about a lawsuit that you were involved with. Can you speak to that?
Sure, I'd be happy. I'm glad whoever asked that question, I'm glad about it. I was involved in a lawsuit about a year ago from a plaintiff that sued me on a promissory note for $30,000 that occurred in 1994, 26 years ago. The lawsuit started 25 years later. And it is it was ridiculous because I wasn't a party to the promissory note. The plaintiff in the case, I told many years ago not to get involved with the promissory note. I wasn't a signature on it. It wasn't my responsibility. I was single 26 years ago. We had a relationship. We were both single. She wouldn't listen to what I said. She was mad that I wouldn't take the responsibility. And consequently, 23 years later, she filed a suit. And in the suit, in the complaint, the plaintiff, in effect, accused me of sexual harassment. It was wrong. It was a lie. There's no truth to it. The judge did not even consider it. It was never part of any discussion other than the complaint, and the people on the internet were putting that out. There's just nothing I can say other than the fact that I'm glad I had a chance to explain it, and I hope that they just leave it alone because there's just no truth to it. And now they've been put on notice that there is no truth to it, and that's it.
Both Dr. Arrico and Dr. Stats are affiliated with electroCore, which trades on NASDAQ. As you probably know, the stock has gone from $20 to $1, and not exactly a great track record or vote of confidence for CytoDyn investors. Can either of them explain why the stock has dropped significantly and why CytoDyn investors should trust their leadership?
Well, let me start first with that. First of all, I think that the reasons that Paul asked me to come on this slate was because of my expertise in medicine, my expertise in patents, and the regulatory affairs that CytoDyn needs so desperately. But I think it's interesting to look at the parallels between the problems at electroCore and the present problems that we have now at CytoDyn. They're very similar. At CytoDyn, at electroCore, we had the wrong chairman of the board. We had the wrong CEO. We were spending way too much money with very little revenue. And guess what? The market rewarded us for bad behavior with the stock drop. CytoDyn has very similar problems. Our stock has dropped precipitously. I believe we have the wrong board of directors. I think we have the wrong CEO, to be quite frank. As much as I personally like him, he's the wrong CEO for this company at this point in time. I would compare favorably the way we responded at electroCore compared to CytoDyn. electroCore, first of all, is a NASDAQ traded company. CytoDyn can only hope it will become a NASDAQ traded company. We replaced our chairman of the board, or actually she replaced herself. We have changed the board significantly. We fired the CEO, did a quick search, and got a very good replacement. We have no toxic debt. We have no debt at all in the company. And there's about 70 million outstanding shares as opposed to almost 800 million for CytoDyn. So I compare the turnaround, which has started at electroCore, to the turnaround at CytoDyn that needs to start. And it needs to start with the 13D.
Just so we can put the issue to bed, is there, where is it? Hold on. If successful in getting elected, do you have plans to buy, merge, collaborate with electroCore in some capacity?
There's no, you only merge companies when there are synergies. First of all, I have no plans along those lines, and there are no synergies. So why would you do that?
Right. So do you have any potential candidates to replace Notter as CEO?
I was asked to look into a potential CEO for this company approximately 4 years ago. It took me about 2 weeks, and I came up with 3 very, very, I believe, good candidates. The candidates that I looked at were people who had experience in middle-sized pharma companies. They particularly had experience in dealing with the startup operation, because from a startup point of view, you can't spend money with a company like this like a drunken sailor. It just is catastrophic, in the results. So you need to look for somebody who's got experience with mid-level pharma company, both with FDA and that type of experience. Plus, you have to take a look at the startup experience of the company. I have 3 or 4 people that I have in mind. I think other people on the board have people in mind. Here's the problem. And like Bruce said, he'll answer any question, not saying, let's go on to the next question. The case in here is we cannot, and we should not, approach any competent, qualified individual for this job under the present circumstances. There's nobody in their right mind that would take this job under these circumstances. We expect to win this election. We expect to go in there, and the very first obligation and responsibility and priority is to find a CEO to run this company in the future. And that is the honest answer to it. We're very much aware of what the qualifications are. We're very much aware of people who would fit those qualifications, and we're not going to insult them by asking them to even consider something that's so tenuous at this point.
Okay, there's a question in chat, and again, we've addressed it, but I want to make sure that we're crystal clear on this. How do we shareholders have assurance that the conflicts of interest between IncellDX and CytoDyn will not harm shareholders of CytoDyn? My concern is dilution or subsequent offerings for insiders that will be a sweetheart deal for them and diluting the retail shareholder.
Let me just jump in here for a second. I mean, that question had to be posed by someone who is somewhat naive with how corporate boards work and their fiduciary responsibilities. First of all, we've already said there's no interest in the company purchasing Incell. But first of all, Bruce, if he's on the board, would have to recuse himself. So he wouldn't be involved at all. No one else has expressed any interest. I mean, this is such a dead issue. I don't know why we're still talking about it.
There's a question about why leronlimab is not being used in the huge WHO study. I don't know if that's really not for us to answer. That's a question for management to answer. There's a comment about our proxy company following Citron Research, and that's the connection. The proxy company is a vendor whose services we're purchasing, and we are not responsible for who they do or do not follow on social media. I mean, I just don't know why someone would think that that's an issue. I think we're through most of the. Well, again, these are what guarantees will you make to shareholders that your group will not take the company private or otherwise make retail shares valueless? This is something I've been reading. I mean, I think again, it's, it doesn't come from these are not informed opinions. There is no plan to take this company private or to hurt retail shareholders. Our, value is aligned with every other long shareholder. We're diametrically opposed to short shareholders, to short people who are short the stock. But if Cytodyne does well, long shareholders are going to do well as well. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. Paul, I don't know if you have any further thoughts. I think we're through most of the, if not all of the questions. They tend to repeat.
The only thought that I had, and I'll be very brief, is I hope that people on this call recognize the degree of sophistication and experience that this slate has. And the most important thing is, you can tell by everybody on this slate, we are all independent. And whoever is hired as the CEO will report to this board. And we will not take anything for granted. We are inquisitive. We will ask questions. We all have served on boards before, and we understand how it works. One of the main problems, in my opinion, is that there has never been any accountability to this company and the shareholders. The CEO has, in my opinion, run this board along with the president as a private little investment company for themselves. And that is the biggest reason why we need change.
I want to thank everyone for participating. We will be doing other webinars. I want everyone to evaluate their opportunity to either support us or not support us through truth and not through some of the lies that are being spread. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.